Today's episode is on Wisp. I actually have quite a bit to say on this one, so let's just jump right in. Base stats on a level 30 Wisp Prime are 370 health, 370 shields, 210 armor, 300 energy, and 1.25 sprint speed. That sprint speed actually does kind of matter with her abilities, but we'll get into that in a minute. Her passive is she's invisible in the air. Definitely an unusual one. Not the strangest I've heard, though. Her first ability is Reservoirs, and bear with me because there's actually quite a bit to explain. You tap cast to cycle through the 3 different reservoirs, each one does a different thing, and you hold cast to actually put them on the ground. They stay on the ground for the foreseeable future. They can still be stopped by nullifier bubbles, of course, which is again why it's foreseeable and not just, forever. When you walk away, the emotes do stay with you for actually pretty generous duration, and you can always go back to them to refresh it, or you can also just recast them. As for what the motes do, well, the Vitality mote gives you more max health, and also gives you a pretty hefty health regeneration as well. The Haste mote gives you a speed multiplier for both travel and attack speed, as well as a fire rate buff. The Shock mote, honestly the weaker of the three, but it's still helpful. Does target enemies near you and hits them with electricity damage with 100% status chance. 5 targets at a time. Now, all of that is affected by mods, with the exception of the status chance and the number of targets on the shock mode. Also, these modes work on a lot of things that I'm kind of surprised they do work on. I know they work on excavators, mobile defense targets, and if I'm remembering correctly, they work on the lures for Eidolons. As well as of what you would expect, like, your allies, your pets, that sort of thing. Her first ability does have an augment, that being Fused Reservoir, and that is, it adds a 4th reservoir that gives the effects of all 3 of them, but it costs 200% energy to cast. Now, that 200% is not affected by mods directly, but it is based on what you actually spend on them, so in that sense it is affected. It is an Exilus mod, which means you can put it on your build pretty easily, but I personally don't run it just because I like having preparation on my Wisp. I know some people would definitely disagree with that, but I don't know, I just find it more fun that way myself. But I have nothing against this mod as a whole. It is actually pretty useful. As for her second ability, well, that's Will-O-Wisp. You send forward a spectral image of yourself to confuse and distract enemies. You reactivate to teleport to its position. You can hold cast it to have the image go much faster, and I do mean much faster, and as soon as you release the ability, you teleport to it automatically. Now, you are invulnerable for a couple seconds after you do teleport to it, which is actually kind of nice. The time invulnerable is not affected by mods, however the duration of the ability and the cost, of course, are. Her third ability is Breach Surge, and I love this ability a lot. You open a dimensional gate that makes enemies release surge sparks when they're damaged. If you aim at a reservoir, you teleport to the reservoir and double the range. Enemies in range are briefly blinded. Surge sparks have a 10% chance on hit and a 100% chance on death to spawn. The sparks deal radiation damage equal to the damage dealt amplified by a damage multiply of 2 at base with 20% stat chance. It has a critical chance of 100%, but only a critical damage of 1.5. And her fourth ability, which we'll get into in a moment, has a 100% chance of activating sparks on every tick. Her third ability augment is Critical Surge, and what that is you spend 50% of energy when you teleport. And when you do teleport to a reservoir, you get 10% critical chance, 2 primaries per meter traveled for 9 seconds, for a maximum of 250% critical chance. The drain is not affected by mods, however critical chance, gain, and duration are. Her fourth ability is Soulgate. You open a portal to the sun, which somehow works as a laser, don't question it. You hold fire to double the damage and increase your energy consumption. You also increase damage vulnerability per tick of Soulgate for specifically Soulgate, as confusing of a sentence as that was. The modes apply bonuses. The reservoirs from earlier. Haste grants corrosive damage. Shock and Vitality modes grant 25% more damage to the laser. Honestly, I don't really care for this ability. I think for a fourth it's kinda underwhelming. The augment, on the other hand, I think is amazing, and what that is Cataclysmic Gate. And that is, Wisp and 2 Spectres cast an orb of 500 heat damage per second, guaranteed heat and radiation status for 10 seconds, and you can summon a maximum of 3 balls, but honestly I don't usually summon more than like 1 or 2. But anyways, everything except for the maximum number of soul gates is affected by mods, which is kinda nuts. This in tandem with her third ability is hilariously effective. I know some would potentially even call it broken. I personally would not. I would just call it very good. As for my build, well, I have a lot of strength. I have growing power on her for the aura, because why not? I have arcane energize to keep the energy flowing. I have arcane bellicose, because that actually does work in tandem with her vitality mode, and is kind of hilariously effective in that regard. You actually get a lot of strength out of that one arcane on Wisp specifically. I have Umbral Vitality and Intensify on her, because originally this was an Umbral build, but I still wanted Intensify and Vitality anyway, so why not have the upgraded versions of them? I have Adaptation on there for the extra tankiness, because she is one of the frames I do bring into the highest end content that I, do. And I also Helmut's Pillage onto her, which at first might seem like a weird choice, but I mainly threw it on there for the armor strip, but I also will acknowledge that the bonus shields that you get from it has saved my ass a couple times. So there is that, but again, it is mostly on there for the armor strip, because that's one thing that she is missing, and armor strip is always a good thing to have. As for Archon shards, well, I have 2 for armor, and I have 3 Tau Forged Red for ability strength. Because why not? That is also why she has over 300% ability strength, and she does get even more than that because of growing power and bellicose, of course. As for Deviri, well, I mean, if you couldn't tell, she definitely is a top pick of mine. She kind of just does it all. She has, support in the form of her motes. She does output quite a bit of damage with both her Breach Surge and her Cataclysmic Gate. And, of course, I put the armor strip on her, which, keeps her going even further. So, yeah, why not? As for Archimedia, she might very well be my number 1 pick. It's either her, Gauss, or Lavos, and I'm not sure which of those 3 it is, because I'm very happy to see all 3 of those. But either way, she is fantastic for things like Archimedia because, well, again, she kind of does it all, as I mentioned with the Deviri segment. But genuinely, she is one of the better ones for it. So closing thoughts on Wisp, and actually for that I have a story I would like to tell, and that is, those of you that have been watching since very early on may recall that I think it was in the original Trinity video, I had mentioned that there were 2 frames I was dreading making a video on, and astute viewers may have realized that the first one was Banshee. The second one was Wisp. And hear me out. At the time, I did not care for Wisp because she only really had her first ability for me. And a lot of that was owed to the fact that her second ability is a bit of a meme. It has its uses, but it is a bit of a meme. Her third ability wasn't clicking with me. I didn't really understand what made it powerful or even how to make it decent. So, to me, that was just kind of a whatever ability. And then her fourth ability was way too linear for the damage output in my mind. So, you can kind of see why I had issue at the time. But, when her Prime came out, the third ability actually started to click with me. I started to realize how it works, how you get the damage to go, and some of the interactions you could do with it. And funny enough, now it's actually either my second most used or my most used helmet ability. I'm not sure which, and if it is my second most used, give it some time, it will become my first most used. Because of the interactions you could do with it with other abilities that are in the game. It's actually quite a fun one to screw around with. And as for her fourth ability, it was still too linear for my taste for the damage output. But then they released Cataclysmic Gate, which completely changed my perspective on it. Cataclysmic Gate genuinely turned it from one of my least favorite abilities in the game, fourth ability-wise, to one of my most favorite abilities in the game in general. I absolutely love just dropping the Orb of Death on enemies and then hitting Breach Surge, or doing it the other way around, because that's actually more effective. But holy crap, it is actually very good. Cataclysmic Gate is unbelievably strong for what it is, and I find that kind of hilarious, but also just genuinely great. I love that. But either way, all that is to say, Wisp went from a frame I really didn't like to one of my favorites. And I know that at the time I didn't like her, she already had a ton of fans, and that's why I was nervous to make a video on her back then. Because of the fact that I had a feeling that I was going to get ripped apart for that one. But anyways, overall, I actually really like where she's at, and I'm honestly glad to be able to say that. Thank you all for watching. Get plenty of water, and have a good one.